Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how I draw brunette hair in coloured pencil. This is my second video on how to draw hair in coloured pencil. My first one is how I draw blonde hair in coloured pencil, so I'll link a card up above so you can check that one out. In future videos I've also got one on how to draw ginger hair in coloured pencil and also black hair in coloured pencil, so make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on them. Anyway, let's get on with this tutorial. So for today's demonstration I'm going to be mostly using Faber Castell Polychromos pencils, but I'll also be using a white prismacolor pencil as well. I'm going to be using this pencil mainly for the blending and the highlights. In terms of paper, I am using the Fabriano artistico watercolour paper. You don't have to use this paper. Any paper that has a good amount of tooth so that it can hold multiple layers of coloured pencil will be good enough. So a good one to use is the Strathmore Bristol smooth paper as well, or any sort of watercolour paper will do. On the side I have listed all the coloured pencils that I'll be using in today's video. For the base colour I am using brown ochre. I use this as the lightest colour and I just start by covering the top part of the curl with this base colour. I then go in with the second colour and start to define where the structure of the curl is. So I'm really just defining the shapes so I know which way the curl is going. I am applying the coloured pencil in very light layers. I do not press hard on the pencil at all, and I make sure that I follow the direction of the curl when I draw. When I draw hair I do not use circular motions, I use lines that flow with the hair, so I'm always making sure that I'm going in the direction of the hair. I then go in with black, my darkest colour, and I define where the shadows are. I just block them in very lightly just so that I know where the shadows are. And I also leave the highlights whiter so I'm aware of where they are as well. When you're using black you don't want to use it too much in your drawing, otherwise it will look flat and there won't be much dimension to it. But if you use it as a base and then add browns over the top of it, then it will look fine. It's really good to get a nice deep tone and deep colours as long as you don't just leave it stark black. I use the burnt umber and walnut brown to go over the top of that black to make it less harsh, and now I'm going in with the burnt sienna to gradient between those shadows into the highlights. The burnt sienna is a really nice colour because it gives a really nice rich tone to the brown hair because it has some reddish undertones in it. I then go in with the lightest colour and use this to help transition between the shadows and the highlights, and use this to go over the highlights so they're not so stark white. I then go in with those darker browns and deepen up those shadows some more and really start to build up the layers. Make sure you're using really light layers here. Also make sure that you're not drawing in circular motions but following the flowing movement of the hair. Also it's really important to keep your pencil really sharp when you're drawing hair. I go in with that black again and deepen up the shadows even more, but I'll always make sure that I leave the final layer with brown over the top so it's not just black, otherwise it won't look realistic. I then go in with the white Prismacolor pencil and use this to blend out the colours to give a nice smooth gradient. And then I'll go back in with those darker browns to help enrich the colours and make it look more realistic. I then go back in with the black, which I put on the really dark places, the darkest parts of the curl. But I'll always put a final layer of brown over the top of that black. I use the first two colours quite a lot in this drawing to help transition between the shadows and the highlights, and to go over the top of the colours to blend it and also get a nice tone that goes all the way across the curl. I then go in with my Faber Castell ink eraser, but you could also use an electric eraser or any stick eraser, and I use that to pull up and lift some of those highlights. I then go in with a white prismacolor pencil to accentuate these highlights. Because we're drawing brown hair, we don't want the highlights to be too harsh, so I make sure that I go back in with the lighter colours over the top to dim them down a bit so they're not so bright. I then move on to the bottom of the curl, where I start by adding a light layer of brown ochre from my base. I then go in with one of the darker browns to go over the sketch that I drew so I know where the shapes are. I use this darker brown to shade in some of the shadowed areas and to basically build up and show where my shadows are going to be. I then go in with the black, which I use to identify where the deepest shadows of the curl are. I apply this really lightly because I don't need the black to be really dark, as I'm going to be adding brown tones over the top of it anyway. I then add those brown tones over the top of the black, and then add the black again to further deepen up the really dark parts of the curl. I then blend this part out with my Prismacolor white pencil, and then I go over the top of this with the browns, and I also use the lightest colour to get the tone again and to really make it a rich brown tone instead of just flat and dull. So I've been using the darker browns to do the shadows. I've been using the lightest colour to help get the highlights and also go over the whole thing to blend it, smooth it out and get a nice rich tone. I use burnt sienna to also get a nice deep warm tone because it has those nice red undertones. I use the lightest brown to help transition between the shadows into the highlights, so I use that colour quite a lot as well. I blend that second layer out again, and I blend it out a few times to really get it smooth. When you want to do the highlights with the white Prismacolor pencil, it's really important that you use the pencil really sharp and press quite hard at this point to get the highlights to really get that white colour into it so it's really bright. It doesn't matter so much for this brown hair tutorial because you don't really want the highlights too bright, but for something like blonde hair where they need to be a lot lighter, you'd press harder to get it a more harsh white. If your drawing looks grainy at any point, then you can go back in with the white Prismacolor pencil to help smooth it out. It doesn't really matter how many times you use that white Prismacolor over the top, just do it really lightly. Obviously the more you do it, the harder it will be to apply layers over the top because you'll be damaging the tooth of the paper. But I use it about 2 or 3 times for each layer to help smooth it out completely. But I then go back in with those warm browns because adding the white Prismacolor pencil does wash out a lot of the colour. I then use that ink eraser to help pull up some of those highlights, and I make sure I use the ink eraser in the direction of the hair, and I then go over the top of it with a sharpened white Prismacolor pencil to further define those highlights. When doing highlights, it's important to do different types of highlights, so you can have a few strands that are really bright and then a few that are dulled down a bit with some of the lighter browns. Otherwise it won't look realistic if you've just got a lot of really harsh highlights and then no kind of mid-tones in the highlights at all. I then go over those highlighted parts with the lightest colour again so that you don't lose the actual tone of the brown hair. So it's not just this washed out white brown, you need to have some of those nice yellow golden brown tones over the top of it. You can see where I'm pressing harder on some of those highlights to make them stand out a bit more. I then start to add some stray flyaway hairs with a dark brown pencil. This helps give the hair a natural, realistic look because the hairs won't always be uniform. They will have some flyaway hairs and some hairs that are slightly out of place. So drawing a lot of them on really helps the hair to look more realistic. I then use the ink eraser to lift off some of the colours from these stray hairs. This helps give the illusion that some of the hairs are further to the back and some are further to the front. Because if you leave it just too dark, it will just look unrealistic because the flyaway hairs will be lighter, seems as they're single strands. So you need to make it look lighter in your drawing by removing some of the colour from some of the strands of hair, and it also helps to add some variety in the flyaway hairs. I then use a sharpened prismacolor pencil to add some white flyaway hairs on top of the curl. This really helps to break up the uniformed look of the curl by adding some of those nice flyaway hairs in a white pencil over the top. And I also added some single strands with a dark brown pencil. And that's it for this tutorial. I hope you guys really enjoyed it and found it helpful. Remember, I've got my ginger hair and black hair tutorial coming up, so make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on them, and also so that you don't miss out on all the other future tutorials and speed drawing videos that I have planned. Thanks guys for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in my next video.